The healing. It's not a straight line.
The healing was not a straight line. It never is. Angela had nightmares, vivid, physical things that left her sitting upright at 3 a.m., heart hammering, the hotel room strange and unfamiliar around her. She dreamed often of Grace. Then he saw her. She was sitting against the stone base of a building, her knees drawn to her chest, a piece of torn cardboard propped beside her. She was wearing a thin jacket 2 sizes too large, her hair pulled back roughly, her face, her face, thinner than he had ever seen it, the cheekbones sharp, the eyes cast down. She was watching the pavement in front of her with the fixed, hollow patience of someone who had long since stopped expecting anything from the world passing by. The sign beside her read, "Anything helps." God bless you. How did Angela get here? What happened to her? Stay tuned and hear it in full details. Before we begin, if you love stories that will shake your heart and change how you see people, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Drop a comment below and tell us where you are watching from and your local time. Now, let us get into this story. Because what you are about to see, nobody saw it coming. Ben Gabriel had always believed that success was a destination, a place you arrived at after years of sacrifice, after missed dinners and unanswered calls, after choosing boardrooms over bedrooms and strategy over intimacy. He had told himself, and Angela, that all of it was temporary. The long nights in Shanghai, the weekends buried in acquisition documents, the holidays marked only by a text message and a wire transfer, all of it was building toward something. Toward them. He had been wrong. The plane touched down at JFK on a gray Tuesday morning in November, and Ben sat in the back of his private jet with his hands folded in his lap, staring at nothing. Outside, New York was cold and indifferent, the skyline rising through low cloud like a wall of old arguments. He had not been home in 5 years. Not once. There had always been a reason, a deal closing, a partnership requiring his physical presence, a crisis that only he could manage. He had sent money instead of himself, and believed that was enough. His phone buzzed. James, his head of security, confirming the car was ready. Ben pocketed it and picked up the last message Angela had ever sent him, saved on a separate device he kept in the breast pocket of every jacket he owned, like a talisman or a wound he refused to let close. I'll be here when you get back. I'll always be here. I love you, Ben. 5 years old. He had read it so many times the words had stopped feeling like language and started feeling like a verdict. Maria Chen met him at the curb outside the arrival terminal. She was Angela's oldest friend, sharp-eyed, composed, the kind of woman who said exactly what she meant and made you wish she hadn't. She hugged him briefly and without warmth. "She doesn't know you're coming," Maria said, sliding into the passenger seat beside him. "Where is she?" Maria looked out of the window for a long moment. "I need you to prepare yourself, Ben." "Maria." "She's not in the apartment. She hasn't been for 3 years." She paused. "Just drive toward Midtown. I'll tell you where to stop." The car moved through Queens, then over the bridge, Manhattan assembling itself around them like a stage set. Ben's jaw was tight. He had called Angela's number 8 days ago and reached a disconnected tone. He had called the apartment line and found it reassigned to a stranger. He had emailed and heard nothing. For 3 years, the monthly transfers had gone out from his accounts. He had seen the confirmations himself, $15,000 every month, neat and automatic. He had assumed silence was peace. He had assumed no news was good news. He had assumed too much. "Pull over here," Maria said quietly. They were on 5th Avenue, near 34th Street. The street was busy, tourists, office workers, delivery cyclists weaving through traffic. Ben stepped out of the car and stood on the pavement, scanning without knowing what he was looking for. Then he saw her. She was sitting against the stone base of a building, her knees drawn to her chest, a piece of torn cardboard propped beside her. She was wearing a thin jacket 2 sizes too large, her hair pulled back roughly, her face, God, her face, thinner than he had ever seen it, the cheekbones sharp, the eyes cast down. She was watching the pavement in front of her with the fixed, hollow patience of someone who had long since stopped expecting anything from the world passing by. The sign beside her read, "Anything helps." "God bless you." Ben did not move for a full 10 seconds. Then something broke open in his chest, not dramatically, not with noise, but cleanly, like a fault line giving way beneath the surface. He walked toward her slowly, his legs uncertain, the crowds parting around him without noticing. "Angela!" She looked up. The recognition came slowly, moving across her face like weather. First confusion, then disbelief, then something he could not name, something layered and old and deeply wounded. "Ben," she said. Her voice was quieter than he remembered. Everything about her was quieter, as if life had turned her volume down. He crouched in front of her on the cold pavement, not caring about the pedestrians stepping around them, not caring about anything except the woman in front of him who had once been his whole world and who he had somehow allowed to fall through the cracks of his ambition. "I'm here," he said, though the words felt shamefully inadequate. "I can see that," she replied. She did not reach for him. If you are truly following this story and finding yourself moved by it, stop for a moment and leave a comment. Say you're here. Say what you're feeling. Because these words are for you, and a story only fully lives when someone receives it. I'm following this journey with you, every step of it. They sat in the back of the car together, Angela with a blanket James had produced from the boot wrapped around her shoulders, a cup of tea from a nearby vendor warming her hands. She stared ahead. Ben sat beside her and let the silence exist because he knew he had no right to fill it. When she finally spoke, she spoke carefully, like someone who had rehearsed pain so many times it had become a kind of discipline. "I waited," she said. "You know I'm not someone who gives up easily. I waited for a year after you left before I started to worry. Then I called. Then I emailed. Then the calls stopped connecting and your emails bounced back." She paused. "I thought something had happened to you." "My number changed," Ben said quietly. "I sent the new one to the apartment email." "I never got it." A silence. "The money," he said. "Angela, I sent. I know what you sent." Her voice did not rise. "I never received it. Not 1 month. I went to the bank. I showed them the account details. The transfers were going somewhere, just not to me." She looked down at her tea. "I sold the furniture first. The paintings. Then your watches. Then my jewelry." A pause. "When I couldn't cover the rent anymore, the landlord gave me 60 days. Then 30. Then nothing." Ben pressed his fingers against his temple. "I flew to Shanghai," she continued. "Did you know that? I borrowed money from Maria for the ticket. I went to your office building. I told them I was your wife." She smiled faintly, but it was the kind of smile that had nothing happy in it. "Your assistant, Linda, she came down to the lobby. She told me you were in meetings and couldn't be disturbed. She told me our marriage had been under strain and that you had asked not to be contacted. She gave me an envelope with $300 and told me to go home." Ben stared at her. "Angela, I thought," she said slowly, "that you had decided to move on. That you had found someone else or just outgrown me. That I wasn't part of the life you were building." She exhaled. "So I left the lobby and I walked around Shanghai for 3 hours and then I went to the airport and I came back." The city moved past the car windows. Neither of them spoke for a while. "My insurance was cancelled," she said finally. "I didn't know until I collapsed in the street 16 months ago and woke up in a hospital bed. 2 months. Pneumonia, then complications. When they discharged me, I had nothing left. Maria was in London by then. I didn't want to ask her again." She looked at Ben for the first time since they'd been in the car. "So I managed." The word managed landed like a stone. Ben moved quickly and quietly once he understood the scale of what had happened. He was, if nothing else, a man who acted decisively under pressure. It was the quality that had built his company and the quality that had cost him his marriage, and now he deployed it in service of repair. A suite at the peninsula. New clothes, simple, warm, whatever Angela pointed to without enthusiasm. A doctor for the initial assessment, and a therapist named Dr. Osei who specialized in trauma and came highly recommended by Maria, who had flown back from London within 24 hours of Ben's call. Angela submitted to all of it with a kind of tired compliance, not grateful and not resistant, simply going through the motions of being looked after because she no longer had the energy to refuse. Ben did not stay in the suite with her. He took a separate room down the hall, and each morning he knocked on her door and asked if she wanted breakfast. Sometimes she said yes. Sometimes she didn't answer. He left a tray outside the door either way. Meanwhile, James had begun digging. The investigation took 11 days. James was methodical and unsparing, and what he uncovered dismantled the last 5 years with the efficiency of a demolition crew. Linda Zhao had been Ben's executive assistant since the company's 3rd year of operation. She was brilliant, discreet, and utterly indispensable, or so Ben had believed. She had managed his communications, his calendar, his personal accounts, and his correspondence with Angela. She had managed all of it. The transfers had been rerouted on day 1, a subtle adjustment to the receiving account details, so small that the bank confirmation still read correctly on Ben's end while the money flowed into a shell account Linda controlled. In 5 years, she had taken $982,000. Every call Angela had made to Ben's personal line had been intercepted and redirected. Every message Angela had sent had been deleted before it reached him. The new number Ben had sent to the apartment email, Linda had intercepted that too and ensured the message was never delivered. The insurance cancellation had been made in Ben's name, forged. And when Angela had appeared in the Shanghai lobby, Linda had not reported it to Ben. She had handled it herself, then told Ben that his apartment in New York had confirmed all was well and Angela sent her love. James laid the evidence on Ben's desk in a quiet, orderly fashion: printed documents, account records, phone logs, a recorded conversation from 3 years prior in which Linda, speaking on Ben's personal line, had told Angela directly, "He doesn't want contact. Please respect that. If you try again, there will be legal consequences." Ben listened to the recording once. Then he sat very still for a very long time. The motive, when James uncovered it, was the thing that made everything both more and less comprehensible. Linda's private journal, found on a seized hard drive, was filled with years of careful, escalating obsession. She had loved Ben in the way that some people confuse possession with devotion. She had believed that if Angela was removed from the picture, gently, completely, permanently, that Ben would eventually turn to her. That proximity and loyalty would become something else. She had waited 5 years for it to happen. It never had. Ben called the police from his hotel room at 9 p.m. on a Thursday evening, and Linda was arrested at her apartment in Pudong at 6 a.m. Friday, Shanghai time. Still here. Still watching. If this story is sitting with you, if Angela's walk through Shanghai is in your chest, or Linda's betrayal made your stomach drop, please say so. Drop a comment. These characters deserve to be witnessed. And so do you, for caring about them. I'm right here with you. Angela found out about Linda on a Saturday morning. Ben sat across from her in the hotel suite's small living area, the evidence summary in a folder on the table between them, and he told her everything. He did not soften it or contextualize it or preface it with explanations of his own blindness. He simply told her what had happened. She listened without moving. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Outside, Manhattan hummed in its usual indifferent register. Sirens, horns, the low percussion of the city existing for no one in particular. "So you didn't know," she said at last. "I didn't know. But you also didn't check." It was not an accusation. It was a distinction she needed to make. For 5 years, you didn't look up from the work long enough to wonder why your wife had gone silent. No, Ben said. I didn't. She nodded slowly. That's the part one need you to understand, Ben. Not Linda. Linda is a criminal and she'll face what she faces. But you handed her the ability to do all of that. You made yourself so absent that there was room for someone else to step in and manage your life, and you didn't notice. She paused. I needed you. And you weren't there to need. Ben had nothing to say to that except, I know. I'm not ready to forgive you, she said. I want you to know that clearly. I know that too. But I'm willing to be in the same room as you, she said after a moment. Which is more than I would have said 3 weeks ago. The healing was not a straight line. It never is. Angela had nightmares, vivid, physical things that left her sitting upright at 3 a.m., heart hammering, the hotel room strange and unfamiliar around her. She dreamed often of Grace. Grace had been 7 months along when Angela lost her. The pregnancy had been careful and hopeful, a secret they had decided to keep until the 3rd trimester, planning a quiet announcement over a dinner that never happened. Angela had gone into distress alone, Ben unreachable, her family far, Maria on another continent, and by the time she reached the hospital, it was too late. The doctors were kind. They told her these things sometimes happened. They gave her paperwork and medication and sent her home to an empty apartment. She had never told Ben. There had been no way to reach him. And then the silence had stretched until it became its own kind of wall. She told him now, in Dr. Osei's office, on a Wednesday afternoon 6 weeks after he had found her on Fifth Avenue. She told him in the quiet, level voice she had developed over years of surviving things alone, and Ben sat beside her and listened and did not try to contain what he felt, which was a grief so large and so belated that it had no proper shape. He wept. She did not then. She had already done her weeping, long ago, in an empty apartment with no one to hear it. Her name was Grace, Angela said. I named her myself. I hope that was all right. It's perfect, Ben managed. I visit her sometimes, Angela said. There's a stone, a small one, in a cemetery in Queens. I've kept it up even when... She stopped. Even when I didn't have much. They went to the cemetery together on a Sunday in December, the ground hard with early frost, the trees stripped bare. Angela carried a small bunch of white roses. The first flowers Ben had ever given her had been white roses, a detail he had half forgotten and she had entirely remembered. She crouched at the stone and was quiet for a while. Ben stood a step behind her, giving her the space that was hers by right. I think I've been carrying guilt about you, Angela said to the stone, her voice low and conversational. Like if I had done something differently, called louder, tried harder, been stronger, you might have stayed. She touched the top of the stone lightly. Dr. Osei says that's not how it works. I'm starting to believe her. A pause. Your father is here. He's going to try to do better. I think he means it. She was quiet for a moment. I'm going to try to stop being so angry. Not for him, for me. Because anger is heavy, and I've been carrying enough. She stood and stepped back beside Ben. He reached for her hand, a question in the gesture, and after a brief moment she allowed it. Just her fingers in his. Not a reconciliation, a threshold. They stood there together until the cold became too much, and then they walked back to the car without speaking, which was its own kind of language. The anger did not disappear. Angela had been honest about that. It came in waves, often unexpected, often at small things. The sight of a woman waiting alone at a restaurant, a phone ringing unanswered, the word transfer in any context. She had been alone in ways that compound. Not just alone without Ben, but alone without money, without shelter, without dignity, without a name that meant anything to the people she passed on the street. She had been invisible. That kind of invisibility leaves a mark. She said all of this to Ben, sometimes in Dr. Rose's office and sometimes across the kitchen table of the new apartment he had found for them on the Upper West Side. Not the Brooklyn place, which held too much of the wrong kind of memory, but somewhere new, somewhere that belonged to this version of things. He listened without defending himself, without offering explanations that sounded like excuses. He had learned, slowly and with effort, that listening without agenda was its own form of love. He had also begun volunteering twice a week at a food distribution center in the Bronx. It had been Maria's suggestion, blunt and practical as always. You need to understand what she survived. Not from a distance. He went on Tuesday and Friday mornings and carried boxes and served meals and spoke to people whose circumstances were not so different from where Angela had been, and each time he drove home he understood something new about the depth of what she had endured. The roses in the garden became Angela's ritual. The new apartment had a narrow terrace, barely wide enough for 2 chairs and a row of planters, and she filled them over the winter months with bulbs that would bloom in spring. It was a deliberate act. She had read once that roses require damage to flourish, that the pruning and the cold are part of what makes them strong. She thought about that often. If you've made it this far, you are the kind of listener every writer hopes for. Patient, present, emotionally honest. This story was built for you. Please leave a comment below. Tell me what Angela's journey has meant to you. Tell me where you are in your own story. I'm reading every word. We are in this together. It was Angela who first said the words Grace's house out loud. They were sitting on the terrace on a March evening, the city below them lit and restless, a glass of wine between them on the small table. Angela was watching the street and Ben was watching Angela, which had become one of his primary occupations, studying her the way you study something you came close to losing permanently. I've been thinking about what to do with all of it, she said. The story. The years. She turned her glass slowly. I don't want it to just be something that happened to me. I want it to be something that happened for someone. What are you thinking? A shelter, she said. A real one, not just beds and rules, but something that actually sees people. Named for Grace. She paused. I know what it feels like to be on that pavement. To watch people walk past you and see nothing. If I can give people one place where they are seen, she stopped. I think that matters. Ben looked at her for a long moment. Tell me what you need, he said. Grace's house opened on a Thursday morning in October, 2 years after Ben had found Angela on 5th Avenue. It stood on a quiet street in the Bronx, a converted building, 3 stories, warm lighting, a small garden in the rear where Angela had planted roses along the back wall. Red ones this time. There were 42 beds. A kitchen that served real food. A room with computers and a printer for those trying to find work or housing. A counseling suite staffed 4 days a week. And at the entrance, a small bronze plaque that read, "For those who have been invisible. You are seen here." Angela stood at the door on opening morning and greeted every person who came through. She wore a simple gray dress and her hair down, and she shook hands and made eye contact and remembered names, because she knew, from the inside, how much it meant to be remembered. A woman named Dora came through the door that first morning. She was 51 years old, carrying everything she owned in a rolling suitcase, and she paused in the entrance and looked around at the light and the warmth and the roses visible through the window at the back, and her face did something complicated. "Is this real?" she asked. "Yes," Angela said. "Come in." In their private life, the rebuilding continued at its own pace. There was no grand declaration, no single moment where everything became whole again. There was instead a long series of ordinary moments, breakfasts and arguments and silences and laughter, the gradual accumulation of a life chosen day by day rather than assumed. Ben kept his promise, which was the simplest and most important one. He stayed. He came home. He answered when she called. On the nights Angela woke from her nightmares he was there, not with solutions but with presence, which she had needed all along. She forgave him, eventually. Not in a speech or a scene, but quietly, on an unremarkable Tuesday in spring when he brought her coffee exactly as she took it without asking, and she realized she had stopped carrying the full weight of the anger, that somewhere in the preceding months she had put some of it down. She told him that evening. He didn't make a big thing of it, which was the right response. "I'm not forgiving you because everything is fine now," she told him. "I'm forgiving you because I deserve to be free of it." "I know," he said, "and because you've shown up every day." "I'll keep showing up," he said, "for as long as you'll let me." Outside, on the terrace, the roses Angela had planted in winter were coming up now, small and improbable, pushing through the dark soil with a stubbornness that had nothing to do with perfect conditions and everything to do with the simple, irreducible will to grow. She had named the shelter, and she had planted the garden, and she had done the hard work of surviving, and then the harder work of deciding to live, fully and with open hands, and the roses were red against the gray city morning, and they were blooming, and so was she. Every story needs a witness. Thank you for being this one's. See you in the next story. God bless you.